Semi-Casual MMA Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are live. Welcome back to another episode of the Semi-Casual MMA Show. I'm your host, Jared Brosnan, and today we have a very special guest. He's an undefeated heavyweight, securing finishes in all 10 of his professional bouts. Currently, he is ranked number 6 in Bellator's heavyweight rankings, coming off a first-round submission victory at Bellator 271. Please welcome tall Steve Mowry. How you doing today, Steve?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good. Happy to have you on the show. But why don't we start off with your last performance? You fought a veteran in Raheem Cleveland, and you made it look easy. Were you expecting to get him out of there as early as you did?
No, but I wanted to. I knew he was like the longer the fight went, the more dangerous he'd become. So for me, the plan was obviously to take the fight where I knew he wasn't, where he didn't really have the advantage, and then just come home with something.
There you go. And I know that I'm sure that the 100% finish rate is something that might be on your mind. It might not be, but is that something that you feel an added pressure to achieve in every one of your fights?
No, I mean, it's cool to have, but I don't know. It's more of a product of the way I'm trained and what I do to be prepared than anything.
And so, just along with the fact that you don't that you haven't seen the judges yet in any one of your fights, is there any part of you that wants to get more of that time in the cage or and maybe get into those deeper waters?
Yeah, but it's not really because I feel like I lack the cage time. I feel like it's just because I enjoy doing it, and I enjoy being in there and competing and mixing it up with bad dudes.
Yeah. So why don't we transition a little bit into the fight that you were scheduled to take at Bellator 277 against Tyrell Fortune. Unfortunately, you were forced to pull out due to an injury. What happened during camp, if you're comfortable with talking about it?
Yeah, without getting too specific, I had a concussion. It's just one of those things. So I had a concussion, and I got a concussion, and then I had a cut too, like a little doozy.
Oh yeah,
this is one of them things.
Yeah. And how long do you think that you're going to be out for?
Hopefully not long. I'm not really feeling. I think that the primary concerns are mostly over and done with. It's just at this point now, it's making sure that I'm 100% whenever I start back with the real rigors of training.
Yeah, I actually had 3 concussions growing up because I played hockey a lot. So I remember there was one that I had that was really bad that I spent almost a month just sitting in a dark room, not able to do pretty much anything. So that was a rough one. But so I feel you there with the concussions, but good to sound that you should be back in there soon. But so another thing I wanted to ask you about is, do you want Bellator to rebook that fight with Tyrell, or were you looking to maybe move on to some other potential opponents?
We'll see what happens. I definitely want to be rebooked as soon as I can. But as for what that looks like and who it looks like it's going to be with, I'm not particularly attached to it.
And then, so another thing I want to bring up, if we circle back a little bit to your first fight, is right after the fight, you received your black belt from UFC welterweight and one of your coaches, Gilbert Burns. What does that accomplishment mean to you?
It means everything. For me, winning, don't get me wrong, winning fights is the business, but I do that because I enjoy it. But what I think the accolades that I'm the proudest of are, getting the recognition from people I look up to, my mentors, my coaches, my teammates, and to receive such a prestigious rank under somebody who's so highly decorated, has these phenomenal accolades as not just a fighter but as a pure grappler. That meant a lot to me, and it meant a lot to me not just because of who I am and what I've done, but also how far I've come. Gilbert's somebody I've been watching ever since I started. He was just entering the public eye and the grappling scene whenever I was starting to train for myself. And it's just one of those things. He had his breakout couple years in jiu-jitsu right whenever I was having my debut as an amateur. So it was what a trip to be able to look back and be like, dang, Gilbert Burns gave me my fucking black belt,
Yeah. And how has training with him helped you out in your career? And maybe not just outside of the the grappling perspective, but just getting that respect from someone who's been in the game for a while, has been in the UFC for a long time. How is that?
No, 100%. I was gonna say, obviously there's the technical advantage of having somebody like him who's able to like, I can come to him with questions and kind of be like, get his insight mechanically and technically, but also Gilbert just as a person and as a personality and his character and the way his approach to training and competing, it's so like advantageous to be around because somebody who's as skilled as him. I feel like for me, every time I take time out to go to him and learn something, I feel like I take a little bit of something away from it, and I would say just overall that's been immense. Like it's not just in my approach to like fighting as an art, but like competing overall.
And he obviously, as we all know, has a big fight coming up in just over a week against Khamzat Chimaev. How do you see that fight going down?
I put Gilbert on anything and everything. Gilbert's coming out of there after getting his hand raised.
There we go. I mean, hey, he's got a lot of plus money coming back on him, so I'd love to cash in on
that's what we're all trying to. Maybe I'll put some money down too. Get my rent paid real quick.
Yeah, there you go. So another one of your training partners in the past I want to talk about is Stefan Struve, a guy that you share a lot of similarities with, especially with your height. How impactful has he been on your career, especially since you both share that massive advantage over your opponents?
Yeah, Stefan was huge. Stefan was, I want to say, like one of the first guys I really gelled with whenever I turned pro. He was always there to kind of like, he was always there. I want to say like, we had a lot of things that we could glean from each other in the room, like things that I felt like I was good at, he was able to take from me. And, obviously just his immense cache of experience and, fighting know-how, I was able to absorb pretty early on. And it's such a pivotal time in my career.
Mm-hmm.
And that said, like a lot of the more, a lot of the most like fundamental experiences I had were because I got to experience them through Stefan. I'm trying to think. My first ever time at a UFC event was whenever he fought Volkov in Rotterdam.
Mm-hmm.
So just to give you some perspective, and it was, I'm very grateful to him, not just to be able to, to have been beside him whenever he did that, but, very grateful to like have spent time with him. And like, after years and years of being compared to him, it was, just so cool to be able to like spend time with him, get to know him, obviously like get to learn from him kind of thing. And I know that like at this juncture in his life, he's obviously transitioned into, he's not so much a fighter anymore, but I'm glad to see, he's still doing well. He's still like a part of the culture. He's still part of the, whatever the ins and outs of fighting. And I'm just really blessed to be able to say I do it.
Yeah, I've seen him doing a lot with the interviews for the UFC recently. So it's interesting to see that. I don't know. That'd be a tough one for me if I was ever getting interviewed by a guy who was 7 feet tall. Constantly look it up. But like I said, thank God this interview is happening over Zoom instead of in person.
I'm laying down on the couch too to take some of the pressure off.
There we go. I appreciate it. So another big change that's happened in your life recently is you recently became a father, which congratulations on that. How has that changed your mindset in the cage or outside of the cage?
Not really so much in the cage. I was already pretty motivated, to compete and do well. And, I think somebody in the gym, one of my earmarks is that I'm known for my work ethic and my, my tendency to be in the gym. I'm always working out. I'm always trying to get better. So I don't feel like, I'll just being honest with you, I don't feel like having a kid changed, my work ethic. But I will say though, it was a big change in my life. I already had a stepson. So it was like, it really made me reevaluate like what it was to, to raise a kid and like what your role is in, a child's life. And then having my own, how much farther it made me think so much farther down, like the pipeline in terms of like, wow, like what are the values I hold near and dear? What are the things that I want to pass on? What are some of the things that that maybe were instilled in me that, you know, I kind of want to get away from, and, you know, don't want to pass along to my own kids. It's just one of those things. Um, it's like I was reading this interview or listening to an interview with Jordan Peterson where he said that like having a kid is one of the most like if people were to have listed their experiences, you know, of the most transcendental things that have ever happened to them, people put having a kid just above like tripping on acid or taking mushrooms, just because of how like instantly and dynamically it changes your perspective on things. And I'd have to say I share that sentiment in the sense that like it really does make you kind of stop in your tracks and reevaluate like what it is and what it is about life that you feel like you gel with, and you know who you are, how you fit into the scheme of things. It's beautiful, man. It's the best thing that could ever happen to anybody, I feel like.
Yeah, well, like I said, congratulations. And now you got quite the fan section coming for you there, which
Yeah,
always
that's
helps,
right.
I'm sure. So another thing, just to circle it back a little bit towards Bellator, one topic I wanted to talk about is the fact that the heavyweight division in Bellator has been pretty stagnant over the last couple of years, especially I think you fought it 4 times in the time it took Ryan Bader to defend the belt. Is it frustrating seeing that lack of activity from those guys ranked in the top 5?
Mm, I don't know, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not really sure I've ever stopped to like. I'm not really sure I ever stopped to like. Uh, I'm trying to think. Like I was always so focused on competing that I never really thought about like my place in the scheme of things. And I mean, my philosophy on like rankings is it was and still is that, you know, it's just a number, and it's cool to get some recognition, and it's cool, like it looks good whenever you're talking to sponsors, I guess. But like as far as like your actual ranking, it doesn't really mean anything, you know, guys. Um, some guys are better than other guys on certain days, and like, you know, you might have a guy who you fight once and then you fight again 2 years later, and like the everything about the matchup, the dynamic, the whatever, the technical proficiencies and skill sets have totally flip-flopped, or and it can happen in just such a short time that like I'm just not really sure rankings mean anything in the sense that like people ascribe so much more like weight and value to them than they actually mean. So to circle back and answer your question, I mean it definitely makes for arranging fights easier, because like, okay, yeah, like if a title fight just happened, then okay, well now we have to find out who's next up, so now they have to make more fights and so on and so forth. So for like the business side, yeah, it's, I guess I don't want to say it's frustrating because it hasn't personally affected me too much, but it is something that like, I guess if you let it go for long enough, that's why people start like, okay, well, like what's really going on with the division? Am I getting a title shot? Am I not? You know?
Yeah, and I'm sure it's one of those things where you weren't fighting a lot of the guys that Bellator has ranked in the top 10 right off the bat. Because I know with Raheem Cleveland, he was just coming in from outside. He had fought in the PFL before, seasoned veteran. But, you know, as you keep going in your career, I mean, I see you fighting for this belt in the next year or two for sure. So hopefully those guys can get a little bit more active. But one of the ways that Bellator has kind of gotten around that is by implementing these tournaments. So do you think that Bellator, would you like to participate in a Bellator heavyweight tournament?
If they did it, I'd be open to it. It's just like one of those things, though. You know what I mean? I feel like the I don't want to say it's a gimmick, the tournament, but it is one of those things where the more you do it, the more you do it, the less kind of like value it has to its allure, you know. Like what makes the PFL so interesting is that like their thing is that it's a tournament, and every year it's a tournament. So you always know who's going to fight who and when, and you know, based on how they performed in the preliminary part of the whatever the bracket. But the thing about like Bellator is that, like what makes it so special is that it is kind of like they and the similarity like the UFC is that the title shots, blah blah blah, it's given like ad hoc almost. Like, okay, well you have a guy like the welterweight division. Like what makes that so interesting is that Gilbert was a guy who, in the span of a year, went from being a lightweight, who, I mean, I'm not saying he performed really well at lightweight, but he went from being a guy that decided he wanted to be a welterweight because he would already been thinking about it for a while, and they offered him a short notice fight at welterweight. To, I think it wasn't even a full year later, now he's a title contender. And I think that there's just something very special about that, like when you implement a tournament, it kind of like throws all that for a loop. You know what I mean? You have a guy who like, and Kamaru had a similar, like, somebody else I consider a friend, a similar thing where it was like, he got his title shot off the strength of his performances. Not so much in contrast to like who he fought and when, but what he was doing just so much more amplified, like his claim to the shot at the title. And I think that when you start doing tournaments over and over and over again and trying to implement that, like, okay, but he just won a fight. It's like, okay, well then what do we really look for whenever we give out these title shots,
Yeah. No, I can definitely see that perspective, because I know with the PFL, even with someone like a Kayla Harrison, who's been the champion for the past couple of years, it's not like every single one of her fights is for the belt. Whereas in Bellator, when you have someone who's already the champion in there, they're always putting up that belt for each round of the
right.
tournament.
And then even more about like the PFL, it's like what to expect. Like every year, it's so like you have a guy who's like, they might have had a breakout performance, but it's like, okay, but if they don't do well in their next fight, they're not going to get a title shot. But then on the other side of that, it's like, okay, well, let's say one guy's not in the tournament or for one reason or the other, but he's killing it. And it's like, okay, well, like, we're already doing this tournament, but like, I really think that's the guy who deserves a title shot kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And
it's
never
like
know when like flukes are going to happen with injuries and stuff like that too.
Flukes and injuries. And then it's like, they have the, I like the PFL format. And I like one thing that was really interesting about like last year's was that, or not last year, the one before, was that when Fabricio Verdun fought Hannon Ferreira, they had like the super controversial like tap no tap thing, and then like, but then they were still giving that guy fights, the Ferreira guy, and he like started killing it, and it was like, okay, well, like, why isn't he back in the bracket? Like, why is it? And I understand why he was out, and I agree with the decision to keep him out, but it kind of like it almost kind of like puts a damper on all the hype surrounding the actual performance itself. It's like, okay, well, it's cool. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm always here to watch fights, but we have to wait a really long time just to see like where exactly he fits into the schematic of the division. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think especially in certain divisions in PFL over other ones, the competition is a lot tighter, and you don't really know what's going to happen in those first couple of rounds. But in those other divisions, like for example, the women's lightweight division, you can pretty much pick every fight to a T,
Right.
So, but oh well. But I mean, hopefully there'll be a little bit more activity for the heavyweights, so we can get you in there for that title shot soon.
Absolutely.
But one other question I want to ask, something I've asked a couple of the fighters I've had on the show, is what would be your dream fight? It could be any fighter, past or present, doesn't matter. Who would that fight be for you?
I've been asked this before. I don't really know how to answer. Is it like, who do I think would pose the greatest challenge? Who do I really want to beat up? I mean,
I mean, you could take it either one of those ways.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't know. Damn, Jeffrey Epstein. We'll go with that.
There we go. I'm guessing that's in the beat up category right there.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah,
I don't know anybody that's team Jeffrey Epstein right now. So
yeah.
As long as I get pay-per-view points for it.
Yeah, there you go. Can't get canceled for that one. That's for sure. So,
that's right.
All right, and then one last question I want to ask you. So when it's all said and done for your career, obviously you got a long ways to go. But when it's all said and done for you, what is the thing that you want to achieve the most, or what's the thing you want to look back on in your resume?
I'm going through a period just in the last like year or so. I've gone through a period where I've kind of like started to reevaluate that, and I want to say, whenever I look back, I want to say I did the absolute fucking most. I want to be able to look back and say like, I mean, obviously everybody, I could stop now and I could look back in 20 years and say, oh, I was undefeated, so I was the best fighter ever. But so And for the longest, I think that was what I wanted to be able to do, is say that I was the baddest that ever did it. But that's always so subject to like what people's, how people define that. So for me, I just want to say I look back, I did the absolute most, the absolute best I could, which I think, probably could be one of the best of all time, not just as a heavyweight, but, ever.
Mhm.
And then moreover, I want to say I made a lot of fucking money. So
there you go. There you go. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show here, Steve. Let's hope that everything heals up quickly and you're back in there soon, keeping that title track. So, but yeah, I really appreciate you coming on here and spending some time with us.
oh yeah, thank you for having me, Jared.
Anytime.